cycle is not.
Welcome. Hello. Today's conversation is going to be unique. The title of the conversation is going to be Fight to Live, but Prepare to Die. For some, this is a generic conversation, but for others, it is quite a literal statement and a reality of their lives. So, with that, we want to welcome our guest that we're going to have this conversation with. Hello, guest, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. How are you?
Okay, all right. So tell us something brief about yourselves.
I'm a father of two. I am a security specialist and business owner, and I reside in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. All right, so we're going to dive into our conversation. For those that are new, this is not our intended format, but due to COVID, we've had to make some adjustments. But always, these conversations are about some statement, some information that someone that is either at the beginning or the middle of a journey, or even someone that's at the end of that journey. The interaction from and reaction from this first conversation would then trigger other conversations, other thoughts, and that is what it's all about. And in this case, our guest has a unique perspective as it relates to this title. So we'll begin and let him tell us a little bit about the journey that he is on as a father and business owner. So guest, it's all yours.
I want to reflect back to August 27, 2020. I went into the doctor for a routine checkup, and during that checkup, they found that I had cancer on my kidneys, not just one, but on both kidneys. I was told that due to COVID-19 restrictions, I would have to be quarantined immediately and have emergency surgery on September the 21st of 2020. For me, it was quite devastating. Being in the profession that I'm in, I'm a business owner. I don't punch the clock for anyone, so everything is on me. Upon receiving that diagnosis, again, I was in shock. I shared the information with my wife, but I refused to share that information with my children because I didn't want any questions from them. I didn't want to interfere with their schooling. Just kind of keep that pressure off of them. I kind of kept it between my wife and myself. It was quite devastating being quarantined, even up until now, looking over 6 months, that my business has basically had to run itself. And I'm thankful for that, that it was able to run itself. But just the mere devastation of hearing that news to a person that has been totally healthy their whole life and has never broken a bone and probably only received one cut and a few splinters in my finger. But to hear news like that was quite devastating.
So are the kids aware now, or did you choose still not to disclose?
I did not disclose that information to them simply because when they hear the word cancer, they associate it with death. And I didn't want them to feel that they were going to lose me, even though I had those thoughts that what if I did die? So I fought, for my life. I was fighting to live, but I was also preparing to die.
So let's go back to the first time you were given that information in the doctor's office. What is the first thought particularly as a parent, but then as a human being, if you can recall, what was that initial thought? Where did your mind go first? Was it, this can't be happening to me, it's not true, I need a second opinion? Or did it go to, how do I tell my wife this, and what will her reaction be? Will she panic? Should I tell her? Did you go through any of that tug of war psychologically between yourself and how that made you feel, or did it quickly shift to your family?
My initial thought was, how could it happen to me? I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, and I only curse when provoked. So I was just trying to figure out how it happened to me when this doesn't run in my family. I've never had anyone in my family with kidney cancer. So for me, initially, it was, what am I going to do?
Did anger ever creep in?
How am I going to share this with? Should I even tell my wife? I thought about not telling her at all, but there was a side of me that said, why withhold this information from them?
What about anger?
Yeah.
Were you ever angry at any point of your journey? Just angry, mad?
I was never angry, and I never cried. I guess the spiritual side, the faith that I had, I think, I know that I know more faith than the average person.
Okay.
My faith would not let, I thought about that I was going to die, but everything in me said that I would live. And that's when I realized that it's all about your mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And when I began to think about living and believing that I could live, I felt better. I wasn't as tired. I wasn't weak. I didn't have the headaches. Of course I had the body aches, and I was a bit nervous. But the more that I prayed and the more that I focused on living, I kind of forgot about dying, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Did you find yourself at that point adapting your day-to-day schedule, not as it relates to your physical activities necessarily due to the condition, but it is, okay, I have superior faith, but just in case I need to spend where I work X amount of hours or whatever, now I better spend some of this time, more of my time, with my children. I better now say some of the things to them at this age that I would have waited until they were 15, 16 years old to have those conversations. Was there any rush or anxiety about if you didn't make it, if you started down that pathway and never returned, would there be unspoken words or thought processes or pieces of wisdom that you would give them, or even your wife? Did you start to have those type of conversations consciously or subconsciously?
And actually, I did. And I didn't realize that over the years, I have been spending all of my time to attain wealth, and not knowing that I was neglecting my health. Mm-hmm. And now I was at a point that all of the money that I have made, all of the wealth that I had made, I had to now spend it on my health. Mm-hmm. So I decided that I would cut the amount of hours that I was working, spend more time with my wife and my children. I made it a point to tell them that I loved them at least 50 to 100 times a day. Mm-hmm. And my daughters asked me, why do you keep telling us that you love us so much? I said, because if I ever leave this place called Earth, I want you to know that your father loved you more than anything in this world. And I didn't want them to fall prey to a male that I did not want my daughters to think that no one loved them. So that I don't know how to put this. I've known women in my life that have never heard the 3 words, I love you. Mm-hmm. And the first time they hear it, it comes from a man that's not their father.
Right. And sometimes the wrong man.
Sometimes the wrong man. And I didn't want them to fall into a trap that a lot of women fall into right now. Why did you do this for this man? Well, you know what? He told me he loved me. Mm-hmm. And I wanted them to hear those words from me every day. And I continue to do that to this day. I tell them I love them. Before I open my mouth, they tell me, I know. You're going to tell us that you love us. And
right.
That's precisely what I want them to know.
Right.
And I want them to feel it. And I want them to see it and experience it. Not that I just tell them about it. That I started creating memories for them. Mm-hmm. Just in case I left this earth prematurely.
Right. And as a human, if I even attempted to put myself in those shoes, as a human being and as a male, I think the thought process, all the human aspects of being a male, so I'm a male and I have a wife, so now the thought process not only goes to, okay, what if I leave this place, what am I leaving my children in this world to, but now what am I leaving my wife to? So do I have a discussion about, if I leave this place, don't be bitter, don't be angry, don't be afraid to marry or date eventually? Or does the selfish side kick in and say, well, do that, but you protect my daughters, or there needs to be a time period before you introduce a person that you're going to date into their life, because I'm kind of a technical guy more than I guess functioning on my emotions. So my thought process would be, so should I have a conversation with her about, okay, bringing another strange male into the house that's not their dad, because we know all that can come along with that. So would then my request be that if you date outside of the home and wait a while and really allow your relationship to mature to the point that you think you can even begin to trust to introduce a guy and bring them into the space of my angels. That at the end of those thought processes ever come?
Yes, and I think about that even today. I say to myself, if she brings another person into their lives, will he love them like I do?
Right.
Will he guard their hearts like I do? Will he protect them like I do? Because they're not his.
Exactly.
You know, and I thought about that, and that was my prayer. I prayed a prayer. I said, Father, if it be your will, allow me to live to see these little girls become adults and have a family of their own.
And even as it relates to your wife, I think my thought process would be, okay, how do I have a conversation with her that doesn't appear to be pure selfishness, but be careful, because, okay, let's eliminate you being the spouse, but if a friend was having this conversation with your wife, okay, be careful about when you get lonely or out of financial desperation or whatever the case may be, you're afraid to be at home alone with the girls, so the first person that pays any attention to you and says all of what you think are the right things in this case, and he's going to step in and be this superhero and cover you and cover the kids. So how, as a man on that journey, how does he balance wanting to protect his friend, his lover, his wife, and giving that type of advice without appearing to be purely selfish, that I'm going to be gone, but even when I'm gone, I want my thought processes about how you should conduct yourself, because we have this added element of having children. Because I'm sure if you didn't have your angels, then your conversation with her would be totally different. But I think children in almost any situation create just a huge dynamic on the relationships and things like that. So, and having to consider them in all things as normal parents do. But now you add an element of being diagnosed with cancer, and the truth is a lot of people don't recover, no matter what faith, no matter how many songs they sing, how much they pray, whatever. Sometimes I often say sometimes, and I always build it into my DNA of my conversation and my thought processes. Sometimes God, the universe, whatever you want to say, the answer is no. So some people have that miracle, some people don't.
Right. You bring up a point where you say the selfish part of me. Mm-hmm. I can honestly say that I never had a selfish thought, because once you're out of the equation, I mean, you only want the best for your family. Mm-hmm. And if that means swallowing your pride and making that choice, that decision. It's a difficult pill to swallow, and now that you talk about it, it's even hard to think about right now.
Like a lot of my topics, they kind of have these dual meanings. For example, this conversation and this subject matter applied to you because you had a cancer diagnosis, right? But
yeah,
in everyday, generally in our lives, I think that perhaps the things that we should most take seriously and put as a priority, we don't. So let's, from a technical aspect, right? So I had this cancer diagnosis, right? But before I had a cancer diagnosis, right, was I fighting to live then? With the cancer diagnosis not even there yet, was I fighting to live, and what would have been that definition of fighting to live? Okay, now preparing to die, the other part. Most people that I've had conversations with aren't actually really prepared to die. They just aren't. Not talking about the spiritual part, but talking about, I have safety deposit boxes. I have certain individuals that I've told, if I leave this place, you go here and you do this. This is there. Here's a safety deposit box. In that safety deposit box is a drive with all of my business information. I've made it a mission of my own, and I always encourage other people, prepare to die, because it's going to happen whether you want to admit it or not. So we don't, and as a consequence of that, then the people that we leave behind are left to deal with things that, had we prepared to die, they would not have. They don't have to search around and look, did he have an insurance policy? Did she have an insurance policy? Where is the information that I need? Or even besides death, if you're hospitalized and you can't speak, what were your wishes? What were her wishes? Did she want to be resuscitated? Did not want to be resuscitated? So I think from transitioning over to that side of the subject matter, how would you grade yourself on how were you prepared to live, fighting to live, and were you prepared to die?
And the answer is yes, I was prepared. And if I had to give myself a grade, it would be an A+.
Cool.
I ensured that I had insurance. I ensured that I had a will. I ensured that I had a medical directive. Things that having a medical directive actually puts you in the driver's seat when it comes to a physician making a decision.
Right.
Because when you have that directive and it's in writing, they have to honor that. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about, is it morally right? Is it ethically right?
Right.
Or is it ethically wrong or morally wrong? Mm-hmm. You take that decision out of the physician's hand and you put it in, you're in the driver's seat and you rely on the chief physician, which is Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. Right. And also,
yes.
Leaving that position, putting that burden, and I've experienced it. I for lack of a better word, burden, but I've had to make that decision because that person did not have a living will, did not have instructions as it relates to resuscitation and being taken off of a ventilation system or what have you. That can be a huge burden left on an individual, and quite frankly, a lot of people aren't equipped psychologically to handle that process. They just aren't. They don't know what to do, because some people are so in love with that woman or that man, and that love is so deep that they can't even imagine the thought process of if they can prolong them having 3 breaths longer, their physical presence being here 1 day longer, that they would not do everything possible to do that. But sometimes when it goes over into that selfishness where my wife is suffering greatly. The doctors and everyone has said, okay, now, we resuscitated twice. We've broken ribs. We've done all these things because you want your spouse to be here. So now, at that point, now you're in this weird dynamic of where you, as a spouse, have now been put in that position to make this amazing choice to let go of the physical manifestation of this person that I love. And how could I do that? And if I had held on 1 more second, then maybe he or she would have turned around. So all of those dynamics goes into what I call being prepared to die, and those type of considerations. So with that, my question to you is, in preparing to die, had you had that conversation with your spouse about, it's in writing, but this is what I want and I need you to be okay with that?
And I did have that discussion. I did place those documents in her hand and asked her to put them in a place where she would be able to find them in the event that I go on. Mm-hmm. And I told her I can't tell her what to do.
All right.
But I can tell you what I have in place, and it's going to be your responsibility to take the mantle and move forward. That I have brought them this far, and if I didn't make it another step, or like my father would say, another further,
right,
that it would be her responsibility to finish the race.
So would you say that the statement of fight to live, right? Do you think that your definition of fight to live, if you thought about pre your diagnosis, what your definition and how you lived your life fighting to live, and after your diagnosis, did that change at all?
I know as a human, spiritually, that we all have an appointment with death.
Right.
Pre-diagnosis, I never even thought about. I never thought about it. Mm-hmm. I honestly never thought about dying. I just knew we all have a date, mm-hmm. but I never thought that it would come in that form.
So see, and this is why I love having these conversations, and these conversations, the goal is for this conversation that you and I are having will facilitate other conversations from the reaction to our conversation, and have this intersection of thought between people that may be in the middle of this journey, the beginning of they just had a cancer diagnosis, or they made it all the way through. So see, for example, just here's how now this is beneficial to me, right? So in having this thought process with you, the fight to live part, right? So fighting to live for me is not about necessarily life living, but how I conduct my life. So that when I say fight to live, that is, for me, goes into fight to live as it relates to enjoying my life. Fight to live for vacation time and birthdays, and fight to live to, as you follow your lead, I love you. You understand I love you. I may not say it often, but I do. So that definition of that fight to live can take on this broad thing. So because people like you and I that are business owners and work a lot, that fight to live for me now is taking on a different definition, because now it's like that fight has to be, I shut down at this time, which I started to implement actually, and we're gonna have movie night where phone is on silent and I'm gonna watch this movie all the way through. I'm gonna fight for that time to walk through the park or whatever it is. So that word fight could be for so many things when you say fight to live.
You just touched on something. I remember I worked so much that my daughter, who's now 9, I came home, she was 4 at the time. And she said, "Daddy, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Well, okay." And I just came home from work and said, "Well, let me change out of my clothes and then you can ask me your question." So after I changed out of my clothes, walked inside, and I said, "Well, what is your question?" I picked her up, and she looked me in my eyes, and she said, "Do you live here with us?" And right at that moment, I realized that when I left home in the morning, she was asleep. And when I came home at night, she was asleep. So in her mind, I didn't live there. When I got in the shower, I cried like a baby. Pre-diagnosis, fast forward, pre-diagnosis, I would walk outside and go and check the mail or take the trash out. But I never took the time to listen to the birds chirp. I never took the time to look at the leaves on the tree or to look at the ones that had fallen. After the diagnosis, I began to see things differently. I began to listen to the birds chirping in the morning. I began to pick up the leaves and smell them and take in the beauty that we take for granted on a daily basis.
Right.
It was the small things that mattered. It wasn't about, I need to go and make sure that the mortgage is paid or make sure that the car insurance is paid. It wasn't about that anymore.
Right.
It was about the little things.
Absolutely. That is it. So that fight is that definition of, fight to live and prepare to die, has this broad range of definition for individual people. But I think that in your case, you should be congratulated. You did a wonderful job of preparing to die. It sounds like a morbid statement, but what's more morbid is when you don't, and when you leave your family just in suspension and limbo about what am I going to do. So for those that are listening, I would like to encourage them to do that, to prepare to die. You should, we all should, and then fight to live. Enjoy every second, every moment. do those things. You know, the one of the most fascinating things to me, and I wanted to change that culture in my family personally, was that, you know, when a person passes, right? So now all of a sudden you see people from all over everywhere. They make the time, they get the plane ticket, they drive through multiple states to come and see the remains of a person. But while the person was alive, that same effort would have mattered to that person, because that person can't see it now. They are gone. So, you know, I said I wanted to start a culture with my family that when a person becomes a certain age, then you have what's called a life celebration. And you make that same effort that you plan on making when the person dies and they can no longer enjoy that conversation, or they can't hear what you have to say. It is so kind of crazy to me that you have these ceremonies where people get up and reminisce, oh, she was such a beautiful person and she loved me and she did this and she did. It would have been so much more powerful if that person, if you had said that to that person, if you drove them from Louisiana to Georgia to say that to that person, to their face, where they can hear it. I appreciate everything that you've done for me. You know, so that falls into my line now of that definition of fighting to live like that. So I'm fighting to live by appreciating people and letting them know, so that after they're gone, this is an empty conversation because I'm repeating it to everyone else in this room but the person that really needed to hear it.
Wow.
And I would we'll close this part one. Of course, part two will always be the responses, whether it is the YouTube responses or emails, or I always do a follow-up show and get the response from other people. But I would say, if I'm a person, if I'm at the beginning of this journey, if I've just gotten this diagnosis, whether it be cancer or any other type of things that are typically identified as like doomsday situations, you know, technology has gotten where now cancer is not so much a death sentence if you catch it on time. But if I'm a male and if I'm a father and I'm at the beginning of that journey, what would be some, now that you've taken that journey, what would be some sound advice that you would give them, any man? So say you are obviously a man of faith, but what if I'm not? What information or encouragement, or what would you say to me as far as this journey that now I am about to embark on, that you've already taken?
It really doesn't take a man of faith to know that whatever a man thinketh, so is he.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about mindset.
Mm-hmm.
If you think life, you'll live.
Okay.
If you think death, you'll die. One of my favorite movies, Shawshank Redemption.
Okay.
He said something that was key. He said, I could either get busy living or get busy dying.
Right.
I got busy living.
Okay. That is it. So get busy living.